This week, we're taking a look at the weird and interesting stories that come from the behind the scenes of actually making a film. Whether it's a film shot in a single take, a director demanding a lot of takes, or an on-set freakout, the stories that come out about the behind the scenes of films are fascinating. Today we're going to question whether or not knowing these things makes the film more enjoyable to watch. Did knowing how much Shelley Duval suffered make us enjoy her performance more? Does knowing that it took Terry Gilliam almost 20 years in attempts to make The Man Who Killed Don Quixote? And does the crew of the Titanic remember anything after the lobster chowder was spiked? Hello and welcome back to the ScreenRant podcast. I'm joined today again with my friend Nick. What's up, man?
Hey, Grant. It's good to be back. How are you doing?
It's great to be back, man, and I'm pumped for today's episode because it's all about the behind the scenes. Almost every movie that has ever come out has probably had something interesting happen behind the scenes. And in fact, some people think that these facts make the film more enjoyable. They'll go so far as even to spread rumors about the facts and potentially spread false information. We're going to take a look at famous examples of behind the scenes moments and see if it adds anything to the final product they were creating. We'll take a look at some famous examples of film trivia where the trivia has been warped over time and is potentially not real at all. Finally, we'll take a look at some weird and unexplainable behind-the-scenes moments that may not make the film better, but will probably make you watch the film with a new pair of eyes. And as always, let's start with some quick-fire examples.
Let's do it.
We have Marlon Brando would read cue cards off-camera in The Godfather. Apparently, the cast of Alien didn't know about the chest-bursting scene ahead of time. There's the fact that Tom Cruise just does all of his own stunts in the Mission Impossible movies. You have O.J. Simpson almost being the Terminator, but James Cameron turned him down because apparently he was too likable for the role. Ed Helms actually had his tooth removed for The Hangover. And one of the probably saddest ones that I found was that Adrian Brody was cast as the lead in The Thin Red Line and was infamously cut out of the film except for a few lines. And the story goes that he didn't even know until he went to the premiere that night.
Oh, that's so insane. Can you imagine being in that movie and suddenly realizing that you were cut from that movie?
You're there with you're probably your family or your spouse, and you're telling everyone how, oh, they had me on set, I was there for months, and I'm the lead, I'm the lead in the movie, and then you show up and you're not the lead anymore.
Surprise! Oh, forgot to tell you.
He was the lead in the movie.
No.
He went to the premiere.
Yeah. And they didn't tell him?
They didn't tell him. I think
you hear these stories from these movies, and you kind of want to watch the movies again with this new information that you have about the films. It kind of makes you think one way or another about the potential end product. And sometimes the behind the scenes for a film gets so complicated that it literally becomes its own movie. And there's a couple of famous documentaries about this, like Hearts of Darkness, A Filmmaker's Apocalypse, which is about the production of Francis Ford Coppola's Apocalypse Now. It was one of the toughest shoots ever, and it was so infamous that the documentary is basically as famous as the subject/movie that it's on.
It's true. There were so many behind the scenes stories in Apocalypse Now that just you wouldn't believe. It's crazy.
And I don't know if you've heard about this one, but one of the more famous ones that I know about is called Lost Soul, The Doomed Journey of Richard Stanley's Island of Dr. Moreau, which, funny enough, also stars Marlon Brando, acting crazy as usual. He was walking around on set with an ice bucket on his head and had crazy demands, but apparently Richard Stanley, the director, was fired after 3 days. And the plot of the movie is that they're on an island and there's a doctor that kind of makes these human animal hybrids. And the female lead was so angry that Richard Stanley was fired that she got a production assistant to drive her home 2,500 kilometers in a rented limo. The crew was so upset that Stanley was fired, he had a breakdown, and with the help of the crew and extras that were outraged, he snuck onto the movie set and was disguised as one of the monsters in the movie, and apparently shows up in the movie as one of the monsters secretly.
Gorian, my jaw dropped when you told me that story. That's so insane. If I had that much clout to get driven around in a limo 2,500 kilometers, man, I would be laughing, rolling in the money. You know what I mean?
I'm in the first limo driving to an In-N-Out right now, please.
Send me to Whataburger.
I think this is one of the examples where you see that the filmmaker was so passionate about his product that the fact that he was removed from the film led him to a breakdown. I mean, these artists really do care about their work that they're creating, and we'll see from this the amount of stories that come out about either directors taking their vision too far or people witnessing some directors going too far. Much like with character acting, some stories from set are so shocking and strange that you can't help but think about them as you watch the films they came from. Whether it's an actor that was pushed too far, or a director mistreating a crew, some of these behind-the-scenes moments can take away from the final product of the film. But sometimes these stories can bring a newfound appreciation for the film. We're going to take a look at some famous examples of behind-the-scenes moments and see if they add or take away from the films.
Oh boy, Gorian, here we go.
We're going to start with what is probably the most infamous behind-the-scenes moment ever. The Terminator Salvation freakout.
Oh boy.
Oh boy. So what is probably one of the most disturbing of these behind the scenes moments is Christian Bale freaking out at the cinematographer Shane Hurlbut. And what happened was that during a take, Hurlbut walked into Bale's eye line. And what happened next is, we can listen to it. We can hear actually what happened because apparently someone was rolling during the freakout.
Up, Bruce. Do I want? No! Don't shut me up. Da-da-da-da like this in the background. What don't you get about it?
So we've all heard it, and he ended up apologizing, but not after the tape was leaked online. And Christian Bale called himself a punk and said, "I was out of order beyond belief. I make no excuses for it." But he also said, "I'm half John Connor, I'm half Christian there."
Yeah. I get it. No, listen. Okay, listen, Linda.
That was John Connor yelling at you, not me, Christian Bale.
I get it. Actors are weird.
Christian Bale insisted that he resolve the differences the same day that the outburst actually happened. And I wanted to start with this example because this shows some of the behind the scenes moments that just sound absolutely brutal for the crew involved. They aren't making fine art here. We're making Terminator Salvation. I think that knowing that Christian Bale freaked out on the set for such a milquetoast movie kind of hurts its viewing for me because despite it already being a lackluster movie, I don't like the idea of watching the credits at the end and thinking, how many more times did Christian Bale yell at them and it not be recorded?
That's a good point. I want to reiterate one thing. What do you mean by Terminator Salvation not being art, Gorian? Explain that one for me.
There's a scale of fine art and Terminator Salvation, okay? and everything is ranked in between there.
Yeah, and the scale's flipped, so fine art is on the bottom and Terminator Salvation is on the top. Is that what you're saying?
At the top, yeah, exactly. Yeah. We all strive to be salvation.
Exactly.
So what do you think? Do you think that him freaking out, would you be able to watch this movie and kind of know what scene that was and kind of go, I don't know, was it worth it to really lose it over this movie?
Yeah, you know what? To answer your question, no. But it does help give context to what happens behind the screen. You know, it's like you watch these movies and it's interesting to know, oh, hey, that's where Christian Bale freaked out, and then you just feel good about yourself. Yeah.
So we're gonna move on from one kind of small freak out to non-stop freakouts, and this is Shelley Duval and the 127 takes she did on The Shining. Shelley Duval almost quit acting after making The Shining, and she holds the world record for the most takes for a scene at one point. I don't know if anyone else tried to just shoot a bunch of takes to try and win the record, but this is the world record for, I'd say, trying every single take. And they filmed the infamous bat scene over and over, and she was dehydrated, her hands were wounded, and she had a sore throat from crying.
Yeah.
And she also reportedly started losing her hair during the making of the film from the stress involved.
Look at this. Pulled all my hair. I pulled hunks of hair out.
Hunks of hair.
Oh, look.
Okay.
And it didn't help that Stephen King notoriously disliked the film for straying from his book, saying that the portrayal of Wendy Torrance in the Kubrick film was misogynistic and she was basically there to just scream and be stupid, and that's not the woman I wrote. And during the production, Stanley would isolate her and cut lines unexpectedly, which, working on set, you understand when an actor loses a line, it's kind of a big deal because you're basically forcing yourself to memorize a script perfectly, and any sort of alterations can really mess with you, especially when it sounds like the director's doing it on purpose.
Yeah, and even just re-listening to that story, it's common knowledge that Stanley Kubrick was kind of a monster on set, and especially during The Shining. So even to just think that Shelley Duval's hair was falling out because of the stress, that's not fair. I feel so bad for her. I don't care if it's Stanley Kubrick or Christopher Nolan. It doesn't matter. That's so cruel.
The exploitation of some of these actors to get a performance, it's really interesting too, because we do see the two different approaches to it, where some actors really want to get that and would probably love to have 127 takes and would probably ask for more takes after that. But the forcing of it upon someone that clearly, and I know the rumor, I don't know how accurate it is, but some people say that they went with the very first take. I don't believe that. We'll try and fact check that, but taking 127 takes for anything is insane. In a book written about the film The Complete Kubrick by David Hughes, she said, "From May until October, I was really in and out of ill health because the stress of the role was so great. Stanley pushed me and prodded me further than I've ever been pushed before. Kubrick's daughter even revealed that Stanley went so far as to tell the crew to show no sympathy for her. He refused to compliment her and the crew ignored her. And the door scene took 3 days and 60 doors." So it clearly seems like The Shining, even based on the documentaries that came out about this film, was both a nightmare but also a masterpiece. So does knowing how badly Shelley was treated during production take away from the excellence that is The Shining? Or does art require some sort of personal sacrifice to create something truly unique and memorable and not milquetoast like Terminator Salvation?
Right. That's a really good question, Gorian, and I think it's a bit of both, personally. That it's very difficult for an actor or anybody to be put in that situation, but like you have to suffer for your art if that's what you want to do. Like it comes with the the notion of being an artist.
And there's just a fine line between pushing yourself to make fine art and pushing others around you. What you have to understand is when you're in a crew, the crew quite often can turn on the directors. I mean, you have 30 or 40 people all listening to you, and if the director does something to kind of make himself stand out or not seem so cool, we will see in a couple of these examples later on that the crew might not be your friend by the end of the film.
That's true. Now, I have a question for you.
Okay.
Given this whole story regarding Stanley Kubrick and Shelley Duval, do you think this would fly today on set?
No way. We'll see some examples from films that came out recently, but I do think that a lot of these high art directors, you kind of look for it going into these movies. I mean, when you watch a Tarantino movie, you kind of have some sort of expectation, and it kind of seems like that's the difference between these things, where you don't want to force your crew to the point where they hate you. But something that Tarantino did for his film, The Hateful Eight, was that he would refrigerate the set so that everyone was cold on set, and everyone would have to wear their jackets and parkas inside. And I think it's stuff like that goes into making some of these films that kind of brings a bit more character and personality to it because of these kind of hardships that they had to endure. I mean, no one wants to go to work in an ice box for 6 months, but if it makes a film like The Hateful Eight, it's worth it.
Exactly.
Is 127 takes worth it? I wouldn't say so.
Maybe not.
Oh, maybe not. So next we have The Revenant and Unexpected Virtue of Ignorance. And Alejandro G. Inarritu is known for creating visually interesting and these kind of complex films, and his two most notable being Birdman and The Revenant. And both films are great examples for behind-the-scenes moments because it rides a fine line between what we were talking about, helping and hindering the movie. And again, much like Tarantino making his sets cold, Inarritu likes to shoot on real locations. And for The Revenant, they ended up actually switching locations from Canada to Argentina because Canada wasn't cold enough.
That's insane. Are you kidding me?
They definitely came here when it wasn't. They should have come here in April when it gets really cold,
Yeah. When it switches from fall to winter and back to fall and then super winter. Yeah.
Our super winters are the worst. So during the production, the IATSE union president, Damian Petty, said that 15 to 20 crew members were fired or quit during the production.
Wow.
And he loves natural light, and they would only film with what they could get. And it apparently got so bad that the producer was banned from the set. And he worked with the producer on Birdman.
Wow. So, I mean, to be fair, the producer probably knew what he was getting himself into.
Exactly. It might have been one of those moments where they give him an inch and he takes a mile. You gotta know what you're getting into, but you weren't ready for this.
No, that's insane. And you know what else I heard is that on the set of The Revenant, Leonardo DiCaprio got very, very sick. Not sure why, not sure how, but it happened.
Well, I don't know how accurate this is, but he said in interviews that he was getting like hypothermia constantly and was shivering all the time. And I'm pretty sure he's a vegetarian, and he ate like a liver on that set. He ate some sort of raw meat, and I think he may have gotten sick from it, but it was a real liver that he was chomping on screen. I don't even know if I'm allowed to show it, but it was real.
Oh man.
Yeah.
That sounds delicious, Gorian.
On the flip side, we have Birdman, which is basically the opposite of Revenant. And apparently, so the cool stuff about Birdman was that it's known for having these long takes, and because they planned that film so precisely, it took 2 weeks for them to edit. it was basically done when they finished filming it. They had a Grammy-winning jazz drum score, and the entire drum score was improvised.
Huh.
And it won a Grammy. Antonio Sanchez, who did the score, he has a master's degree in jazz improvisation from Boston's New England Conservatory Music School. How cool is that to have in a movie? Hey, guess what? Our movie is so cool. It won a Grammy, and he did everything improvised.
Wow. I'm not going to lie. I vividly remember the soundtrack to Birdman because it was so interesting and cool. And I'm not a jazz expert, but I do like jazz. And Damien Chazelle's movies like La La Land and Whiplash. I love it.
I was going to ask, were you rushing or dragging?
Oh, that's good. I see what you did there.
Yeah, there you go. And then we have the famous Times Square scene, which was shot after midnight to minimize the amount of bystanders. And while most of the people that ended up on screen in the frame were hired extras, it's still awesome to hear that they actually kind of got naked and ran around Times Square with him.
Yeah.
It's nice to hear this because you hear about how much talent came together to create Birdman. And with these two films, it's an example of how there is a right way to be an eccentric auteur on set and a wrong way. Is it wrong to be excited for Alejandro's movies because you kind of know that there's going to be a story that comes out about it? I mean, we're all excited for his movies, but I'm kind of always excited to hear about what it took to make this one.
That's true. And you know what? It actually makes me more excited for his movies because he's such a visionary. I love the guy. But he's always going to push the boundaries and do something different on set. And I don't know, even just as a filmmaker or as a regular person who watches movies, it's just really cool to know what happens.
Can you think of another filmmaker where you're excited about their films just because either, you know everyone on set's having a great time or it just seems like a blast to be on?
You know what? One thing that I've always wanted to experience is, and this may not necessarily pertain to the question, but Christopher Nolan, I love the idea of being on his sets because he definitely has a way.
100%.
Exactly. But he definitely has a way of doing things. But he always makes sure that the crew and the talent or whatever, nobody has their phones unless you need it, obviously, right? But I've never been on a set like that, and I kind of want to experience it.
We got one of the more famous examples now, Jaws. And one of the most famous examples of behind-the-scenes moments comes from the production of this film. I mean, it was so grand. It has books written about it. There's multiple documentaries about it. And in addition to great behind-the-scenes moments, there's so many of them that are really well documented. I don't know if you've ever seen this video, but there's a video of Steven Spielberg watching the Oscar nominations in 1976, and you get to see his film not get nominated for, I think what ended up happening was he ended up getting Best Picture nomination, but not Best Director, or vice versa. And basically his friends there saying, how can you have the Best Picture without the Best Director?
No
and we
way.
often find ourselves asking this. It's very sad to watch.
You cannot have the best picture unless the director is also nominated. Who made the picture? Somebody's mother?
That's incredible. I'm kind of picturing this video play out in my head. I haven't seen it, but I just want one still of it, like a shot of Spielberg, and then it becomes a meme called Sad Spielberg.
And it's like if you can pause the video, you can see the moment right where his heart breaks,
Yeah. Just one tear, a single tear.
You can actually pinpoint the second when his heart rips in half. And now.
The film's budget ballooned from $4 million to $9 million after Spielberg decided to shoot in open water rather than a tank on set. And it didn't help that Bruce, the mechanical shark, barely worked. I mean, everyone knows that film is notorious for planning so much of the shark to be shown, but at the end of the day, you barely see the shark in that movie. And it was always intended to appear earlier in the film. And what was cool is that you just had to get creative with it. And through that creativity, you have one of the most memorable scenes in film history when they shoot the shark with the barrels, and the barrels are running along the water, so you can't see where this monster is, but you know where he is, and that's terrifying.
Yeah, it truly is. And I know when it came out, it sort of revolutionized that psychological horror genre. You know what I mean?
My mom told me she was scared to shower after seeing this movie. I don't know how many parents are out there that have kids that talked about this, but apparently no one went to the beaches after this movie came out for a good chunk of time. People were terrified.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. You know what else happened? It was with Psycho, and the infamous shower scene, right, where the knife is stabbing through the curtain. But people were terrified of that. They were scared to take showers after. It's the same thing.
And cool fun fact about Psycho: first on-screen flush of a toilet. Huh?
Wow. Cinematic history, my friend. Cinematic history.
That's what it's known for.
And the Oscar goes to...
So Jaws originally planned to be a 55-day shoot. It took 159. And Spielberg himself said that given on a 12-hour day, they'd only be filming for about 4 hours because of all the problems that they would run into. A popular phrase on set is hurry up and wait.
Yep.
We all know about that.
Oh, yeah.
And hearing the struggle of a passionate director who's forced to turn to creative means to keep his vision going, I think it not only adds to the film, but I'd argue it's almost necessary to fully enjoy the film. And I don't want to sound gatekeepery, but when the crew of a film runs into these problems and struggles to create something, and to have it turn out as spectacular as Jaws, I think they need their due diligence. And maybe after another great movie you see, stick around to the end of the credits.
Exactly. You know what? I'm going to sum it up in one phrase here. Knowing the behind-the-scenes stories adds texture to the experience. Bam. Trademark.
I like that. While we can argue all day over whether knowing what went into the creation of some of our favorite films helps or hinders the film, we can all agree we're sick and tired of hearing all these fake facts. All right? Over the years, there have been a handful of these that people say like it's a fact, and it gets skewed over time that people are kind of regurgitating these things. So we're going to take a look at some of the more famous ones and debunk these myths. One of the most commonly touted film facts, even in film school, that I've ever heard over and over again is that when people went to watch a train coming into the station in Paris of 1895, people ran out of the theater thinking that they were going to get hit by the train. What people didn't know was that back when this film came out, there was 1,400 other of these 1-minute style films, and they were called views at the time because they were meant to be experienced kind of like a postcard. You kind of watch a living picture from around the world. You get to experience a minute in 1895, might not ever get to see in your life. So no one from 1895 is alive to confirm this, but there's enough evidence to make a logical guess that these people didn't flee from their seats. I mean, often there was a lot of rhetoric that was used in the reviews of this film, and you can find articles where they say that the train is coming right at you. And there's even a silent film in 1901 that pokes fun at this called The Countryman and the Cinematograph, which shows a bit of a dummy who gets kind of scared by these moving images all of a sudden.
That's really funny, actually. And I'm not going to lie, this is a fact that I heard a lot in film school myself. Like, to me right now, this is news that it isn't actually real.
Mm-hmm. And every time you see anyone, in the 50s and whatnot, having those 3D glasses, everyone's always putting their hands up and kind of touching the screens. And I feel like this illusion of that, we're so... We can't not believe what we're seeing. It's so mind-blowing, where I think I've only experienced this maybe like once or twice in my life watching something that I actually think it's coming at me. And it's been in VR,
Yeah. Oh, man.
I really don't think that people were running out screaming.
Yeah, I don't know. That seems a bit far-fetched to me. But you know what my biggest takeaway from this is?
What?
The fact that there were so many of these 1-minute views or movies. Could you imagine essentially this in modern times? If you went to the theater to watch a 1-minute movie, like effectively a TikTok or like a Vine or something. I'm going to hop onto this theater and watch Charlie Bit My Finger for a minute. And, now I'm going to go see Look at All Those Chickens, Kid.
I really want to disagree with you, but I really do think we're going towards some sort of weird future where there might be a TikTok option when you go to the theater where you're watching 90. I swear to God, I feel like you will be able to go to a theater and say, I want to watch the most popular TikToks from this month. And you'll have groups of people going and absolutely loving it. I mean, I can't tell you how many people I've met that can quote Vines, let alone these TikToks. They are taking over.
Gorian, can I ask you one question really quick? What's your favorite Vine?
I'm more of a Common Ivy guy.
Common Ivy guy? I don't know if I know that one.
Yeah, it's my favorite Vine.
Really?
You haven't heard of that Vine?
Wait, how does it go? It's
in like South America. It's like deep in the jungle.
Yeah.
Yeah. They have vines there.
Huh. Oh, cool. Oh my God.
Nothing goes over my head. My reflexes are too fast.
Thanks, Gordon.
Another famous example that people like to repeat, that Michael Caine was apparently so shocked by Heath Ledger's performance of the Joker that while they were filming, he forgot his lines in the party scene. And you can see the Joker walk right by Michael Caine without saying a gosh darn thing. Doesn't that sound exciting, Nick?
That sounds exciting to me. How about you, Gordon?
Would that make the film better if it was real, if you knew that, watching that scene?
Listen, I don't know if it'd make it better, but it would be really cool.
Exactly. But it didn't happen. What actually happened is that in that scene, Michael Caine saw Heath Ledger in his full makeup for the very first time. And there's another fact where he never forgot a line because there wasn't a line there. While they were rehearsing in preparation for the movie, Michael Caine said that he was rendered speechless when Heath Ledger read his lines. What I think ended up happening was that people crossed these stories together, and we ended up having he forgot his lines at his performance in the scene where he saw the Joker for the very first time in makeup.
Oh, yeah. You know what? That kind of makes sense. I can see how that would have happened. Yeah.
So another one we have is Lion King Sex Guy. And this one was big when we were kids, and it's one of the oldest ones I can remember, and is that if you look at the right spot in the sky during the Lion King, the stars spell out S-E-X. And the actual story for this, the animators in it put the letters SFX for special effects as a sort of inside joke between animators and special effects people.
Okay, Gorian, question for you. Now, do you think that's actually what happened, or is that just the official story? Big air quotes, my friend.
Very true. I mean, we have what they said happened in it, but you know what? It's almost too close. SFX? I don't know. Whoever came up with that.
Yeah.
So then we have the most famous sound effect in the world. Doesn't matter what language you speak, you know what the Wilhelm scream is. Where did it come from? I mean, it's used so often, but it's kind of weird that something that's so famous, people don't really know about. I mean, these days, if something is famous, you know everything about it, but we don't even know where this sound came from until I did some digging.
You know what? I actually don't entirely know where this came from, and I would love to hear this.
There's been a lot of rumors where they say that a man was murdered for this sound effect back in the early days, but that's the furthest thing from the truth. What actually ended up happening was that the scream came from this film called Distant Drums in 1951. And in the film, a soldier is bitten and dragged away by an alligator.
And the Oscar goes to...
And after the scene was filmed, they recorded 6 screams, which were labeled, "Man getting bit by an alligator, and he screams."
That's very on the nose. Yeah.
Well, you know that they labeled it "man getting bit by an alligator," and the editor was like, does he scream? I don't know. You need to label these better.
That's really funny.
And the 5th scream is the infamous Wilhelm scream, but the 4th, 5th, and 6th screams were all used in the film. And the recorded ended up going in the Warner Bros. Archive and was used in basically every film after that, including the 1954 version of A Star Is Born.
No way.
You really hurt me.
Wow, that's actually fascinating. Okay, Gorian, you want to hear a little fun fact about me?
Yes.
So, you know how people, when they fall asleep sometimes, they'll put on meditation sounds like the sea or the wind? I just put on the Wilhelm scream on repeat until I fall asleep, and there you go. I can confirm that it works.
Can you send me that MP3 after this?
Yeah, it basically just sounds like sleep. Yeah.
So then we get to what I think is kind of, I don't know, seeing this in a movie always makes me instantly skeptical. And it's anytime you see something in a movie where they say based on a true story. I really tried to get down to the nitty-gritty about the legalities of this. I tried to see if it was a phrase that you're allowed to say based on true events, based on a true story, based on real events. Basically, you can put whatever you want in the beginning, and as long as the tiniest little bit was real, you're allowed to say that.
Wow.
And the dumbest example that I can think of is from the film The Strangers. At the beginning of that movie, there's a little tag card that says based on a true story or something akin to that.
What you are about to see is inspired by true events.
Move this man!
The film is a house invasion movie where masked strangers are torturing this seemingly innocent couple. And after the movie, I Googled to see how much of this was real. I mean, I know it's not 100% real, it's a horror movie, but apparently the only thing that was real about that was that someone knocked on the director's house, asked for someone that wasn't there, and walked away. It was the wrong house. That's all it was. And they attach this little innocent tag at the beginning of tons of these movies. And it's basically a surefire way for you to say, okay, I'm going to look into the behind the scenes of this because I'm pretty sure that what I'm about to see isn't based on some facts or stories that are real.
Yeah, and I love how that has the opposite effect of what it's intended for. Essentially, you say based on a true story, it's like, oh, it's based on a true story, right? But no, like you see that, you need to take it with a grain of salt. That's just what people have come to assume now. It's so silly.
And you know what? It's always nice when a lot of films sometimes play with this too. I mean, one of my favorite films of all time is Pain and Gain, and I don't know if the film begins. It is based on a true event, and the events have been twisted a little bit because it's a Michael Bay movie. It's very fun, but there's a part where The Rock is barbecuing a severed hand's fingerprints. Do you remember this?
Dude, I was specifically going to say that is like one of the most ridiculous scenes in the movie.
Do you remember what happens?
I don't remember. They're cooking the body parts on a barbecue, right?
And then a title card pops up, a freeze frame, and the words, "This is still based on a true story," shows
I remember.
up.
That was brilliant. That was a brilliant use of that. I loved it.
You need to just grill these fingerprints off, all right?
Yeah, and at that point, it's less about the filmmaker saying, hey, this is real. This is a real, It's more so that they're reminding you to constantly be questioning everything when they say these things, where how much of this is based on a true story. I mean, at that point in the film, you really are truly thinking, okay, this is the superfluous stuff that they're adding in, where Michael Bay's saying, no, do your research. And one of the great things about Pain and Gain is that that's one of the films where it's based on a true story, and the true story is crazier than the film.
Right.
Things happen that were excluded. Same with The Wolf of Wall Street. If you read that guy's book, it is insane what they didn't include in the movie. And the true story is way wilder than the movie could even begin to describe or show. So sometimes you do really need to have these things to kind of push you in a direction to start doing your own research and maybe read the book that the film's based off of or something.
Interesting. Yeah, that's pretty wild. I'm not going to lie. Like, The Wolf of Wall Street is a long movie as is. And I mean, they cover a lot. So the fact that there's more and there's crazier stuff is mind-blowing to me.
All I'm saying is when his boat is sinking and they're taking the helicopter, look into that scene because it was even crazier. We've been through some behind-the-scenes moments that we think either add or take away from films. We've seen some that just aren't real or have been exaggerated and changed over time to the point where we enjoy the fake facts more than the real ones. But now we couldn't really categorize these. These next ones, we just think people need to know. Behind-the-scenes moments don't always have to be something that can make or break the final product for you. Sometimes things happen behind the scenes that are just too good of a story to pass up. We're going to take a look at some of these behind-the-scenes moments that will make you look at the films in a way you probably haven't before. We have Titanic, and Titanic is a film that's really well known for having a super rich behind-the-scenes look at the amount of dedication that the cast and crew had to do. I mean, they were like floating in freezing waters for hours on end. A bunch of the crew got hypothermia. The story that jumped out to me was that during the production of the film, there was a mystery illness that found its way on set. And on August 9th, 80 crew members got sick and had to be hospitalized and complained of hallucinations. And what people originally thought was food poisoning, the Canadian police discovered that after testing the lobster chowder, it was dosed with PCP.
What?
The lobster chowder made the crew trip. And none of the cast had the PCP-laced chowder, and the culprit was never found.
What? I'm sorry. That's still registering. Okay, all right, I'm following. That's great. Hey, shout out to the Canadian police, I guess. Good for them for figuring that one out.
Yeah.
Did you guys ride horses or?
Yeah, this is in 1957. We drive Crown Victorias.
They did shoot a little bit of this and either right near Nova Scotia, actually. And this is one of those stories that obviously, maliciously drugging a crew isn't cool. But the fact that a film that is as big as Titanic, that grossed as much money as it did, that something like this could still happen. These are just people that you're working with and hiring that come off the street. And it's kind of surprising to think that these aren't the well-oiled machines that a lot of people think they are. I mean, sometimes the chowder gets laced.
Yeah. And I mean, you wouldn't think of it, but I have a question for you. Do you think this is more okay? Do you think this was a malicious thing, or do you think it was more of like a cool kid at Catholic school spikes the punch at prom? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I definitely think it was someone thinking they were a lot edgier than they really were, and kind of probably on set for like 12 hours. They were probably asked to stay another 8 or something like that, and just got fed up with someone else on the crew and decided to take vengeance against them.
I bet you any money it was one of the background actors.
Yeah, it's the guy that falls and hits the propeller on the way down. They cut his line.
Yeah.
They cut his Wilhelm scream. Actually, we have Tim Burton, and he did a Charlie and the Chocolate Factory movie that had real squirrels on set. They literally trained real squirrels to come in and crack nuts and sort them on this conveyor belt. And they spent 8 weeks shooting this scene and 10 months prepping for it.
Do you know if those squirrels were union or non-union?
You know what? They were non-union, and no animals were harmed on this movie.
Oh, good.
The behind the scenes for this is just bonkers to watch. And have you ever worked on a set that had animals on it?
I have, yeah. Never squirrels. That's an odd one. I've never heard that before.
Yeah. They're notorious, depending on who you go with. The animals don't really listen to you a lot of the time. These animals that they use in these movies that are well trained they're making bank. These animals are making the bank. I mean they are. I worked with a cat once that they were paying $600 a day. And that cat did not act. I think someone just brought a cat and charged people to set. It was insane.
That's so funny. Can you imagine Air Bud's bank account?
Mm-hmm. That's why we didn't see him in Call of the Wild.
Yeah.
That's what's gonna happen with actors. We're just gonna scan them into movies once they get too expensive, like Air Bud.
Exactly. You know those like YouTube videos where it's like top 10 reasons why this actor isn't working in Hollywood anymore? Just that with Air Bud. Why doesn't Hollywood cast Air Bud anymore? I don't know. It's a good question.
Number 10, too many kibbles in his rider, you know? We have a kind of a fun one. This is one of my favorite films and franchises of all time, Halloween. And a fairly famous one is the Michael Myers mask in Halloween. And the trivia goes that they took a Captain Picard mask and painted over it to get away with any legal trouble. And this fact was kind of spread for ages, and it was one of those facts that people didn't really know if it was real or not. I mean, you can kind of tell in the film that it looks like it, but we didn't know if it was maybe a knockoff mask, was it an actual mask? And this ended up being confirmed by Rick Stemback, who was an illustrator and working on Halloween 2 with the production designer J. Michael Riva. They only had one mask from the first film and didn't know where to buy more. And they noticed that there was a model number molded into the neck of the mask along with Dawn Post Studios. They called them up and they confirmed that it's our Captain Kirk mask. And they ended up sending a whole box of them. And they wanted to pay them, but the company just wanted credit in return in the film. And I think it's a great fact because, again, it shows you how creative sometimes these directors have to get on these movies to create a piece of art. You know, you're Halloween. You're the slasher franchise.
Yeah.
What's the killer wear? Painted dollar store mask. And we meant to do that, right, guys? We all, yeah.
It's art. It's fine art, Gorian. It's fine art, okay?
Thank you. Hey, something that makes Halloween 1 fine art, they shot that film, I can't remember, it might have been California or Florida, but they shot it somewhere where it was hot. You can see palm trees in the background.
Boy, I really hope somebody got fired for that blunder.
And that film is notorious for being a cozy little fall, suburban film. So what they would do is they would just shovel in tons and tons and tons of leaves onto set every single day to make it look like it. And I'll do a little freeze frame, but when you do see the palm trees poking out in the background, I think it adds a little bit more to the movie when you're watching it.
Huh, yeah, I like that. That's cool.
And also, I don't know if you saw it, but did you end up checking out Edgar Wright's Baby Driver?
Oh, I actually love the movie. Yeah.
Love it. And in that film, Edgar Wright originally wanted his crew to be wearing these Mike Myers masks, like from Halloween franchise, and he was denied permission to use them in the film. So instead, he called up Mike Myers, the actor, and asked for his permission to have his likeness as the masks in the film. And this joke is basically like, I can't tell if it's a double, triple, or quadruple entendre, because it's a joke within the movie universe, while at the same time kind of giving a wink and a nod to like a bit of what went on behind the production of it.
Gorian, when I first saw that in the movie, I laughed so hard. What a brilliant way to work around that.
I was busting a gut when I saw that. And, you know, the second you saw that in the theaters, too, instantly you think Edgar Wright's a big fan of horror films. Like, he's just so wickedly smart with this stuff.
I think he's also a big fan of The Love Guru, too.
Mike Myers was in The Love Guru? Where?
Yeah.
Like as an extra in the background or something?
Wait, hold on. Like the actual Mike Myers, like the actor.
Yeah, he was in The Love Guru as who?
Dude, I think he was the Love Guru. Yeah, he's the Love Guru.
Nothing goes over my head. My reflexes are too fast.
So this next film is a bit of an older film that I haven't seen, but I thought it was kind of interesting. There's a film called The African Queen, and there's a lot of behind-the-scenes stories about it, but one of the more quirkier ones is that John Huston and Humphrey Bogart were the only people on set that didn't get infection after drinking the water because they were mainly drinking whiskey on set instead of water.
Smart men.
Mm-hmm. Very smart. And this is one of those things where, again, I'm saying it in this video, but who knows if they were actually saying it as a way to make themselves seem a bit more macho or something, you know? We didn't get sick. We were drinking whiskey the whole time. It is a cool fact to say, but who really knows if it was real?
Yeah. I don't know. That's awesome.
We have the usual suspects, and Benicio del Toro apparently kept farting so much that the cast kept breaking down laughing. And what was supposed to be like a very serious scene ended up being this really fun, lighthearted scene that like everyone quotes to this day. Everyone's quoted that scene in The Usual Suspects. And on the DVD commentary, Benicio says, all I remember is that someone farted and no one knew the guilty part. And Kevin Pollak in the film said, Del Toro farted like 12 takes in a row. And Bryan Singer, the director, apparently chewed them out over lunch break. And it just made it even harder for the actors to take serious after they got chewed out by Bryan. So...
dude,
watching that scene and knowing how angry Bryan Singer was at these people just makes that 10 times better.
It makes me so happy on the inside. In my opinion, Benicio del Toro, keep on farting, my man. Keep on going.
And lastly, I want to end on this one because I do think this is one of the more interesting stories to me in terms of behind the scenes, and it's all about the Blair Witch. And the Blair Witch is notorious for being this small budget film that raked in money. I mean, I remember when the very first Paranormal Activity came out, very similar situation where they filmed it for, I think, $10,000. And I mean, those films make a lot of money. They don't need to do this anymore. But when the very first film came out, it was still independent. And I remember having to log onto a website and you had to request for them to play this movie in your city. And I remember everyone online was talking about how spooky and scary it was, and they were trying to get it to play in their city. And this just helped elevate the hype for the film. And the Blair Witch did this in the 90s perfectly. People quoted that the budget of this film was between $25,000 and $60,000. And it's known for being this indie, grungy. Some people find the film annoying. I think it's endearing. And one of the more famous of the first found footage films. And Chris Rock even has a joke about it where he's saying, everyone's like, ooh, it only cost $60,000. Where the hell did the money go? Somebody's walking around with $59,000 in their pocket. Which, you know what? We watched the movie. Where did that money go? But the production wanted the experience to be basically as real as possible, so they wrote a 35-page outline for the film, and they intended for the actors to improvise most of the dialogue in that movie. And the production would give the actors GPS units and would program locations for them to go to unlock their character's next part of the story. Basically like a living escape room. They would walk somewhere, find a little film roll canister, and take a little piece of paper that has their next direction in it.
Interesting.
We knew that we were going to put them through a lot. It was always walking that line between what was reasonable and unreasonable. And it's like we need to push them as much as we can.
That is fascinating. You know what? It had one of the best marketing campaigns, I think, of almost any movie ever. Yeah.
Well, 100%. So what the director did was that he wanted to keep the film extremely mysterious and went to great lengths to make sure that the leads went basically missing after the film was about to come out. They didn't do any press for this, and there's this infamous image for the film. I mean, everyone remembers it. It's the missing poster with their three faces on it and a number to call and a website to go to. Do you remember that?
No, okay. I was still kind of young when all that stuff happened, but
but
I mean, like historically, I don't remember it as if I was there, but yes, I historically I do know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean, I didn't remember it when I was a kid, but going back, I did a ton of research just because I love reading about this stuff when I do find out this about a movie that I like. And I also didn't think that it helped me that my mom saw the first Blair Witch movie and thought it was a documentary and told me so when I was like 10 years old and didn't find out that it wasn't real for like a good 5-6 years later.
Oh, wow. I feel like that would mess with a kid.
Oh, it messed with me. And
living proof.
What ended up happening was they had these missing posters that they handed out, and they gave them out to festivals that were showing the film. And these ended up on the early internet along with a website that helped kind of push this narrative further that they were all missing and dead. And, you know, people have taken this and kind of pivoted it slightly too, where I remember when Cloverfield came out, people were still using MySpace. It was like around 2007. Spoiler for Cloverfield, one of the characters gets cut in half by the monster at the very end. And if you go on the character's MySpace page after the film premiered, his height goes from like 6'2" to like 4'3" on the MySpace page.
Wow. That's actually really funny.
Yeah.
It's so good.
Out of all the movies that we looked at today, what do you think are going to be the movies that you're going to have to watch again through a new pair of eyes after hearing what these films were about?
You know what? That's a very good question. I think that I'm going to have to rewatch Jaws.
100%.
Yeah, like for a lot of reasons. Also because it's a great movie. But I kind of want to also watch The Shining again. And just knowing what I know now, I want to see how that translates on screen to like Shelley Duval and all that torture she must have gone through.
Especially because we have the sequel to compare it to as well. I mean, it's perfect timing because we get to see a pretty great movie. Who was in that? It was Ewan McGregor, right? And it was a great movie.
Yeah.
And they didn't need to do 127 takes for it.
And exactly. You hit the nail on the head. And just add one more movie to that list. I think I'm going to have to go back and watch Terminator Salvation just because it's fine art. So
someone out there has to defend the fine art.
Exactly. Let us know what you think in the comments below.
Yeah, please. So, knowing about the behind-the-scenes moments on our favorite films helps connect us to the filmmakers. We can't get enough of these great stories. It's a big reason why the DVD commentaries were so popular and why people are struggling to accept digital without having access to these really great behind-the-scenes featurettes. I mean, I have hundreds of DVDs that I've slowly stopped buying them, but I'll still buy DVDs and Blu-rays as long as they have a commentary on them. I won't buy things anymore if they don't come with some sort of additional bonus insight into it. And I think commentaries are perfectly great because you do get to have that instant feedback from the director or the people that worked on the film. I mean, one of my favorite films of all time, Scott Pilgrim, has 4 commentaries on the DVD. Fantastic, all of them. And the best one is with all of the, not the extras, but all the people that kind of had smaller parts in the film, like Audrey Plaza. And it's them just sitting around talking about whether they think anyone's even listening to it or not.
Oh, Gorian, that is so... I haven't listened to that commentary, and I think it's hilarious, but I love that movie so much, and I'm so happy you brought it up.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Where can they find you?
Well, thanks a lot, Gorian, for having me. It's been a slice. I am all over the web, personally, at Nick the Sound Grip, but you can also find my podcast, Did Somebody Say Movies, at DSSM_podcast.
Do you ever listen to movies with commentaries?
I don't. I should more often, but I feel like I have a hard enough time watching movies, like sitting down and doing it as is, and I kind of don't want to go back and watch a movie again with commentary, even though it would be fascinating to listen to. Does that make me a bad person?
I don't think so. There's definitely a strange place for us that will rewatch an entire season of The Simpsons just to hear what the writers were thinking about during these jokes. And so many of these are also out there for you to consume on your own. I mean, there's a fantastic commentary with Edgar Wright and Quentin Tarantino for Hot Fuzz that they did together and put online.
And there's a scene just as John Travolta and Samuel L. Jackson walking out, goes, this is some kind of Pulp Fiction, huh?
What, are we some kind of Suicide Squad?
All I know is that I'm going to keep buying DVDs to listen to these commentaries because sometimes they're better than the film itself. There's a great commentary with Ben Affleck and Bruce Willis for Armageddon that is funnier than the movie itself.
Stunt acting is always fun to watch. Whoa!
My stuntman, Terry Jackson, was almost killed on this film.
Thanks so much for checking out the podcast. Make sure to subscribe and leave a like, and let us know what movie you can't wait to watch after finding out what went on behind the scenes. I gotta go with Jaws on this one. Apparently, George Lucas showed up on set and got his head stuck in the mechanical shark's mouth.